All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Nick Fochman with Uninet's Customer Success Team, and today we'll be going to cover Leave Accruals and management. If you have any questions, please type them into the question box on your webinar dashboard, and we will review them all at the end. This webinar will be recorded and will be available online within a week in case you want to review it again or share it with someone else on your team. All of our webinars are located in our Knowledge Center, and you can find them by typing the title of the webinar in the search box. If you experience any audio or visual issues, please try leaving and rejoining the webinar or try using a different audio option. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. We are happy to have Christiane Smith from Uninet University to present. Christiane, are you ready?
Thank you all so much for joining today's presentation. So as Nick said, I'm Christiane Smith and I'm here from the Uninet University team. Today we're going to be talking about some basics of accruals and leave management in Uninet. I also wanted to take you through some scenarios that will diagnose and remedy. Those are items that you may see yourselves or come across in the future, issues that you or your employees may be having as you're attempting to use your leave or to manage leave balances for your team of people. We'll also do a Q&A session. As Nick mentioned, if you have any questions throughout this session, please type them into the questions box through the GoToWebinar, and then when we get to the end, we'll talk about the questions and I'll attempt to answer as many of them as I can. And for those that we don't get to, or if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer, I will research those and we'll get back to you after today's webinar. So I think we'll go ahead and get started from here. So let's talk about the accrual process first and talk about our accrued leave. You can create accrual plans in Uninet. Your administrators of Uninet will set up and manage those accrual plans based on the policies and procedures that you have. You can have multiple plans that cover vacation, sick, time, anything else that you have that you're accruing over a period of time. And you'll want to make sure that you have a copy of your accrual policies or your leave plans or your employee handbook as you get in and start to set up those accrual plans in Uninet. Once the accrual plans are established, then you need to associate the accrual plans with the people, the employees that you have in the company. Part of that process is going to determine how you want to schedule your accruals to run, so we'll know how often you are going to be accruing that leave time. For that person, we want to understand what their hire date is, which provides the level of seniority if you have an accrual plan that does change and provide a different number of hours based on months of service with your organization. And you'll want to also understand any other rules that you have around that accruals, like if a user is allowed to have a negative balance. The assignments are going to be automatically generated when you associate a person with an accrual plan, so I'll show you that in a little bit. Finally, we also want to talk a little bit today about other types of leave. So in addition to accrued leave that you may be managing for your employees, we also want to talk about other non-accrued leave. Many of the customers that we work with here at Uninet provide hours off for things like holidays or even things like jury duty that may not be scheduled or regular, but you may assign some time for when someone needs to use it. We manage those non-accrued leave options through, typically through projects and assignments. So we want to talk a little bit today about the assignment budgets and the assignment dates and how you can have a new user set up to work with those leave balances as well. So I think that the best way to go about this conversation is to actually go ahead and get into Uninet. And I'm going to do a demonstration where I walk through the accrual plan setup and talk about some of the things that you'll want to look for in your accrual plan setup. Now, if you already have an accrual plan, That's great. And hopefully it's working really well for you. But there's a couple of key items that I think even in reviewing this setup that may be helpful for you to make sure that yours is set up to make things as easy as possible for you. We'll also want to talk about planning the accruals and scheduling those if they're happening on a regular basis and at the time that you want them to happen. And then I'm also going to show how to set up a brand new user. So we're going to assume in our demonstration that we have employees that are already a part of our accrual plan and already accruing leave in Uninet. And we have a new employee that we're going to be hiring and associating that user with an accrual plan. We'll also talk a little bit about other leave projects as part of this conversation and talking about how to provide leave for other things, as I mentioned, like the holidays or the jury duty. So let me leave my presentation here and go on into Uninet. Okay, so this is my Uninet demonstration system. I'm going to start off with the admin setup menu. So for those of you that are administrators of Uninet, you have access to the admin dashboard and the setup submenu. Those of you that are administrators are probably fairly familiar with this screen. Even if you're not an administrator, hang with me for a couple minutes here as we talk about the accrual plan options. You may see some things that you want to go back and talk to your administrator about that they can make changes on. Under the time section, we have accrual plans set up, and in this system, I have 4 different plans that I've already got set up. So I'm going to be talking about this plan that's called the standard vacation plan for right now. So in my demonstration, what I'm going to assume, okay, is that my company has a vacation plan that we have accrued leave, and every pay period, which happens to run on a semi-monthly basis here, so twice a month, I'm going to have my employees earning a certain number of leave hours or accruing those leave hours. The leave hours are going to change based on their term with the company. So based on the months of service or their years of service with the organization, we're going to have the plan being changed or providing more hours, in this case, for people with a longer tenure with the organization. So if I use my edit pencil here, I'm going to go into the plan and talk about some of the things that have already been set up for this plan. The first is that period type. So because my pay periods are semi-monthly, that's the type I'm using in this example. Your Uninet system may use any other period type. We offer weekly, semi-monthly, and monthly plans, quarterly plans, annual plans. So you can have your system set up to accrue on all different kinds of periods. So you will want to make sure that that lines up with your policy. It doesn't necessarily have to line up with your payroll. You might have semi-monthly payroll but only accrue monthly or something, and that's fine. The accrual plan period does not have to match at all your time period or your payroll periods. The plan that you're using will want to be active. That means that it is going to be part of your accrual postings. If you have old plans that maybe you've moved away from, or if you are in a position where you're going to implement a new accrual plan and deactivate or retire an old plan, you can always deactivate the old plans and create a brand new plan that will have you start with that new process. The accruals can be posted in a couple different ways. First of all, we can have manual posting where you will, as the administrator, go in and post the accruals, excuse me, whenever it's appropriate for your business. You can also have the system automatically post the accruals at the beginning or the end of the period that's identified here. So if I have a semi-monthly period that runs on the 1st and the 16th or the start dates of my period every month, it says here that I started this in 2016, but it's going to go on every month in this case. And I post that automatically at the end of the period. It's going to post on the last day of the period. If you do have the system set up to automatically post, the beginning date would be, of course, the first date of the period. You can send an email to a personal email box or to a company box that allows you to see the results of that post. Otherwise, I'll show you where the results can be seen in a little bit. Now, in the accrual plan itself, I have set up here my schedule for the accruals. So I can identify from this screen how many hours per period, in this case twice a month, I'm accruing. based on the months of service that I have. Every employee has a field on their person profile called the hire date. That's what Uninet uses to identify the months of service. And so as time marches forward and people move into the next slot, they'll start accruing at that higher level. I also have some caps. So my company's rule for accrued leave is that at the end of the year, you can carry forward 40 hours into the new year at a maximum. That's called in Uninet an annual cap type, and the cap hours are 40 hours. You can vary this by the levels here, so you could have this varied. So if individuals are allowed to carry different number of hours based on their seniority, that's something that you could apply here in the cap hours. We also have caps on hire dates and caps per period. So if your company, for example, has a per period cap, what that means is that instead of at the end of the year, you're only allowed to carry forward a certain number of hours. Per period cap says that you're not allowed to accrue more than a maximum number of hours, which we also see fairly often. So for example, if your plan says you're not allowed to accrue more than 200 hours total, you would have a per period cap of 200 hours, and the system would stop accruing leave for users that had that number of hours in their plan. With a calendar year or a higher year cap, in those cases, the next time the post happens after the first of the year or after that user's hire date, the cap will be enforced. So it's at the post that happens as close to those dates as possible. Lastly, there's an exceed checkbox. What the exceed does is it determines whether the users are allowed to go negative. Okay, it's not related to the caps. It's related to whether or not you're allowed to exceed your total leave balance, or in other words, you're allowed to have a negative leave balance. Many of our customers choose to not allow the plan to exceed by default, meaning that your employees can't have a negative balance unless you give them special permission to. If you check the exceed option here, that means that anyone associated with the plan can carry a negative leave balance at any time. So those are a couple of main things to keep in mind. Make sure that you have thought thoroughly through the caps that are being enforced and that exceed option, even if your plans are already set, whether or not you're allowed to have negative hours and if you need any caps. So let's go back to the scheduling. The scheduling is kind of key. We'll have occasionally clients that call into our support help desk and say, you know, my accruals aren't posting, you know, we don't know where the data is. Well, you do want to make sure that you understand what is set up for your accrual posting. So I have my accrual posted set to the end of the period. I could also set this to automatically post at the beginning of the period, but the system will not post the data unless you have your schedule set. So again, for the admins, under the admin dashboard in the schedule, you can see your automatic accrual post schedule listed in your system actions. My accrual plan schedule ran today at 6 p.m. Now my accrual is set to run at the end of the month, so it probably didn't do anything today, but it's just showing here that I'm running this, you know, kind of on a daily basis. So any day that comes around at 6 p.m., the system's going to check and see if any of the accruals need to be posted. If so, it'll go ahead and do it. If not, it just doesn't do anything. With the edit pencil here, you can modify this schedule. So I could have this running on all different kinds of schedules. You don't have to worry about scheduling on the actual post date. If you choose to schedule the system daily, like I said, if there's nothing to post, the system just validates there's nothing to post and move on. But you do want to make sure that your schedule is posted at least as frequently as you would have your administrator manually posting the accruals. And you can choose the time of day and what days those may be posted. about what happens if you have a brand new user. I'm going to go through a scenario here with a brand new user. I have Susie, who's just getting started. Her hire date was sometime in the last couple weeks here. So Susie is my brand new user, and we need to go ahead and set her up with the accrual plan so that she can start earning leave hours. From Susie's person profile, which I can access as an administrator, I'll go into the accruals dashboard. So just as a quick review, how I got here is I went to the people dashboard, I searched for this Susie user, and in her profile, by using the edit pencil, I'm able to come in and see the profile and go to this accruals menu to access the accrual association area. For Susie, I'll add here an accrual plan association. When I do that, I have to answer a couple of questions. First, I have to know which accrual plan I'm going to associate Susie with based on what she was agreed to in her hiring and what plans I have available in my system. I also need to understand the accrual begin date. By default, the system puts in the hire date. So we assume that you're going to start accruing leave as soon as you're hired. If that is not accurate, of course, you'll want to change this date. For example, if you do not have employees starting to accrue until they have been with the company for 3 months, you would want to set this date into the future so that the system would not have them start accruing until that 3-month anniversary has come. If they should start accruing right away, that's great. You can go right on back to their actual hire date or just let the system default into their hire date, and that'll be the day the system uses to start their accrual. For the accrual end date, when you first are hiring somebody, you won't be adding in an end date because we're going to assume that they're going to continue to accrue leave indefinitely. I will come back and talk about when you have a person leaving your company, when you might want to update the accrual end date. So I'll get back to that in a little while. In the meantime, for my new user, Susie, I do want to choose the project or task that Susie's going to use to record her vacation time. What that does in the system is it basically provides an assignment for Susie to this project, in this case, my vacation project, so that it's available on her timesheet and she can start charging time to that vacation project. So it creates the assignment for you for the user to access the project. When she uses the project to record time, the accrual plan is going to be smart enough to recognize that as hours used against her leave. And as she earns additional hours every time the accruals are posted, she will be having that budget will update in her assignment to this vacation project automatically. When you set up a brand new user, you can determine if you're going to have an initial balance for their leave. So for example, if I hired Susie and I negotiated with her that I would give her an extra week of leave when she starts, I can enter that as a starting balance. For any of your users that are already using accrual plans and you decide that you're going to change the plan, this is when you would use this transfer option here and instead transfer her hours from another period. In this case, Susie's brand new, so I don't have a transfer to make. Or I can set this to none, and that would assume that she's starting with 0 hours and she won't have any hours until she starts to accrue based on the accrual schedule that we just looked at. So let me go ahead and save that. Oh, well, when you save these, you may see messages like this. So for example, in this case, what I have is a user that started, but my last accrual posting for this plan is going to be after the 15th. So it wants me to go in and update this so that I can put her in for the next period. Sometimes we run into these issues if your accruals have already been posted when you hire a new person, et cetera, et cetera. What we typically recommend then is you set up your plan to start with the next full pay period and entering a starting balance of what she would have accrued in that interim time period. The same can be true if you're going to have the plan start after that temporary period that I mentioned, where they will start with a certain number of hours maybe that they have accrued, but they're not allowed to use it until that period ends. And that's where you're going to use the starting balance to enter that data, so they have something to start with when they can use that plan. Okay. Now, in addition to my accruals, I'm also going to want to give Susie access to come in and do things like take leave time for holidays, or perhaps to have some other type of leave. So the other thing that you'll need to do when you have a brand new user is think about the other projects that you have that they'll need access to. So of course you already have that in your list of direct work projects, maybe your internal projects where you record your overhead time. But here I have in my system a holiday project. So I'm going to want to go ahead and assign Susie to my holiday project, which is going to allow her to have access to the holidays. All my users have the same last name, very creative, huh? Susie's access will start from her hire date or from today or whenever you want to set that up for. And traditionally with things like leave for holidays or jury duty, military duty, you're going to set your assignment dates to be equivalent to the period of time that you're tracking that leave for. So a jury duty assignment may come up last minute. Somebody's going to be on jury duty for 3 days. You'll provide a 3-day assignment and off they go. For something like holidays, we traditionally see that going for a calendar year. So here, Susie's would be prorated from the beginning of her hire date to the end of the year. I might choose to prorate those hours that she's given. I'm going to choose whether or not to allow her to exceed the budget, meaning she can have a negative number or use more holiday hours than I provided, but I'm not really going to do that here. And then I can send her out an email to let her know that she's been assigned to holidays and save this, and voila, now Susie has access to holidays. Okay. So those are some basics that we have for getting a user started with their accruals, managing and setting up the accrual plans, and establishing their access to other types of leave like holidays, jury duty, etc. All right, well, I know what all of y'all are thinking. That's not that easy. There's got to be some more to it. There's got to be some real life going on here. So, you know, in real life, of course, not everything is going perfectly all the time, right? There are things that are going to come up that aren't working as you expect. You're going to need to understand more about the reporting and how to see what people have accrued, what leave they have access to. Are they about to run out of leave? Will they have enough leave to take off time in the holidays if they choose to at the end of the year? These are all things that you might want to understand. So I want to encourage you to be a good detective, to really figure out the system, to diagnose your issues and help to remedy them so that you'll know how to manage the system well. So let me go through a couple of examples with you, and we'll talk about some things that happen here. So the very first thing we're going to do, we're going to make today's session somewhat interactive. I have some poll questions out there. So Nick, if you want to go ahead and launch poll 1, I'm going to ask everybody to answer our poll question for today and see how many folks have been have things come up. So what's the possible reasons that a user can't see their leave project on their timesheet? Okay, there's a couple different reasons here. You can choose more than one reason if you'd like. You know, think about what are all those reasons that someone can't see leave on their timesheet. Let's try to diagnose that issue. There's nothing worse than wanting to go on vacation, put your feet in the sand, or head out to the mountains and you go to fill out your timesheet and you can't put that leave in. Or maybe you really want to go take your holiday, Memorial Day or Independence Day are coming up here in the U.S., exciting times. I know if you're anything like me, you love your holidays. Let's see what we've got here. So it looks like a number of you, almost everybody, has said all of the above. We had a couple of responses in some of the areas. The great news is everybody is right. There's no wrong answer because the answer is all of the above. So all of these things can contribute to an issue of not being able to see the leave project on your timesheet. So you do have to have the accrual plan out there and associated with the user, like we just walked through with Susie. And we also need to have the accrual association date set up for the current period and to have the assignments. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and close that poll, Nick, that would be great. So when you have the data on your accrual plan, remember that we have the accrual plan begin date. So from the person profile, we came into the accruals here. We just looked at Susie. And this accrual date, if the association has been made, if this is in the future, that could prevent a user from being able to charge time to their leave project. They won't be able to charge that time until that date comes and is in the past. So do take a look and check for that. The other thing that you might run into here is that in your project for leave that has been assigned, like the holiday time or others, each one of those projects may have a budget of how many hours you're going to use. If you're out of hours in your vacation accrual or out of hours in your other leave that's not accrued, that's not going to prevent you from not seeing the project in your timesheet. You'll still see it, but you may not be able to charge to it based on your budget. However, the dates of your assignments can cause an issue. So, for example, here I have Grover Cleveland. His assignment for this holiday project ended in March. I don't know why. I don't know if this was some kind of mistake, but this is going to cause a problem if he's trying to charge holidays now in April or into the future. So definitely take a look at that. Just as another note, there is a whole Knowledge Center entry that contains some reasons of why you can't see a project on your timesheet. That applies to both leave projects and to any other project that you have in your database. So do check out that Knowledge Center entry. It may be very helpful to you as you're trying to diagnose other timesheet issues. Okay. All right, so Nick, we have another question, another item that we want to take a look at and see what we have here. So if you can go ahead and ask our poll question, thank you. All right, so I want to ask, how does Uninet know if an employee has reached a service anniversary so that your plan should have them accruing more hours? I'm thinking that our problem really is here that we think we should be accruing at the new level. You know, I want my 3 or 4 weeks of leave and I'm still not accruing that. How does the system know what I should be accruing based on my service anniversary? And is that maybe the reason why I'm not accruing at the level I think I am? So thank you all so much for participating. See the votes trickling in here. Appreciate that. So it's kind of fun to see what answers we get for our questions. Okay, so I think we're doing pretty well here. Thank you all for answering. One last opportunity, last call. How does Uninet know what your anniversary date is? Okay, great. Nick, can you close this one out? Let's take a look at the answers. Okay, so y'all did a really great job here. It's a lot of really great thoughts about how we identify what your anniversary date is. The system does officially look at the hire date, number B, letter B, the hire date field on the person's profile tab to determine the months of service. We do have a payroll hire date field that you can add in if you're using the payroll screen in the person profile. That is not the field that we're using for accruals, however. So in fact, some of our customers will use that hire date field on the person profile as kind of representing seniority date, and let the payroll hire date on the payroll screen be the actual hire dates, particularly for those users, employees that you may have come back to you after some time, or that are have a different seniority level. Okay, so thank you, Nick. Let's go ahead and move on from there. So the anniversary thresholds are identified by the hire date. When you go in and look at the accrual plan association, that is going to tell you what your begin date is for the accruals, but the hire date itself comes from the person's profile hire date. So I can see here, I'm looking at Gus Lead. He has a hire date in April of 2013. He started using Uninet in 2016, so that must be when they did their Uninet implementation. So even though he started to use Uninet for accruals, we are going to identify his service date based on that hire date. We're going to go out and identify now that he's hitting that 5-year threshold. And remember, based on my plan, when I hit the 60 months or 5 years, I'm going to start accruing at a different level. So I would expect that after April 13th, based on that hire date, that Gus is going to start to accrue at the new level of 5 hours per pay period. One of the things that you should be very aware of is that Uninet does prorate the number of hours that you're earning based on your hire date for this anniversary. Oh, so I said that incorrectly. So here, Gus's hire date is the 12th of April. Remember that our periods in this scenario are running from the 1st to the 15th. So the system will assume that you should be accruing on the old accrual rate from the 1st to the 11th, and then from the 12th to the 15th, accruing at the new accrual rate. So instead of seeing 5 hours for the period of April 1st to the 15th, I would see some number here between 3.3 and 5 that's prorated for that period of time. If you choose instead to not want your prorations to be happening, if you want, for example, for the period the 1st to the 15th to just start accruing at the new rate, or wait until after that anniversary date to start accruing at the new level in the next pay period, there's a couple of ways to manage that. Some of our Uninet customers will modify the hire date to always be in line with the payroll period, and use the payroll hire date, which again is available on the separate payroll screen if you for tracking the actual hire date. Others will instead choose to manually adjust to the user's balance for that one time period where they have their anniversary. That's only necessary if you don't want to use the proration that the system is built with for that one switch based on your service anniversary plan here. But just something to look for if you're looking at accrued leave. All right, so we have our next question, our next issue that we're going to start to diagnose. So Nick, if you want to bring that one up for me. Thank you. So here we go. We have a situation where we have an employee that's leaving. They have accrued hours, and we're going to pay those out. So what should you do? There's a number of options here. You can choose more than one. So you don't have to just choose one. You can choose more than one. And see, what should you do if you have leave that needs to be paid out? And I will say, as you're thinking about answering this question, even if your user isn't leaving the organization, but for whatever reason, if you're choosing to pay out leave and you're not going to actually use that time or record it in a timesheet, there are some other ways of managing that, which I'll show you here. So the scenario I'm going to show you after we finish the poll is it can be used for any time you're paying out leave. Okay, so what should you do? You've got somebody that you need to pay out their leave for them. You have multiple choices here to choose from. What are some of the things that you should do as you are getting ready to pay that out? Thank you all so much for participating today. Appreciate that. All right, so I think we've got in a lot of answers. Nick, you want to go ahead and close this one? And we'll take a look at your results. So these are my favorite polls. Congratulations, everybody. You got them all right. Everybody is right, because all of these answers really do apply to our scenario that we're going to be paying out our leave balances. So, you know, of course, somewhere in payroll, however you manage your payroll process, you'll have to cut them a check or send them payroll, or however you're going to pay for the leave itself, which of course is going to be handled outside of Uninet. We would recommend that in Uninet, you adjust their accrual plan balance to show the hours that you're paying off and taking those out of the available hours for them to use for leave. If they're truly leaving the organization and they no longer will be accruing, you will want to add an end date to their accrual association. And one of the things that you can do, this is kind of just a cool thing, you can go out and check the leave liability report in Uninet to see how much money you owe them. And that leave liability report can be used in a number of situations, you know, beyond the scenario that we're discussing. So let's talk about some of these things and see what we have here. So here we have Gus again, and I guess we're going to have, in this scenario, we're going to have Gus, we're going to pay him out for some of the hours that he has. So when I come back into Gus's person profile, I'll come up to accruals, and I'll have this option where I can go to the accrual adjust function. Excuse me. Accrual adjustments can be made in any scenario, okay? You can add hours or take hours out of the accrual balance based on this plus or minus here. In this scenario, I'm going to pay out all of Gus's 75 hours of accrual. So it does show me here when I choose the plan how many hours are available. I'll put in that I'm going to take them all out, taking his balance out to 0. I'll add in a comment because I can see that comment in the accrual details report. Not only can I see it as the administrator, but Gus can see it as the user in his own accrual detail report. Gus's manager can see it under the people report. So the documentation for the comments is very important as you're adjusting someone's balance so that they understand, you know, why you're doing that plus or minus. Okay. So when I take out the hours, that's great. That's one thing. That's allowing that now to go back to 0. The other item that was there then was thinking about putting in an end date. So when you come back to the accruals menu for Gus and go into the accrual list, there's an end date field there that I showed you earlier. That's where you can add in an end date to be their termination date, and therefore they would not accrue any additional hours after that point in the automatic accrual process. In addition to the accrual piece then and balancing that out to 0, the other piece that you can do here, if you are wondering about how much you owe them, if you're looking to find leave liability for other reasons like doing balance out with your leave liability in your general ledger, you can run this people accrual summary report. This report is available to any administrators. And the option here to show the cost and liability is available to any managers or viewers that have the cost rate manager role. Managers and viewers that can see this report but don't have a cost rate manager role will not see this checkbox option. So instead, they would just be seeing hours. With that option checked in the report criteria, you'll see the user, their cost rate, how many hours they have accrued and what their balances are, what's available to them based on how much they have accrued and used, and what that total liability is for them. So again, this is available to administrators or to managers and viewers that have the cost rate manager role. I'm showing this report for just a single user here. You can also run this report for a group or department within the company so you can see your total liability across various groups and for the whole company as a total. So that is something that is very, very helpful to many of our clients that are managing their leave liability in Uninet and doing those journal entries into their accounting system. All right, we have one more question here, another thing that we're going to diagnose. So Nick, if you could start the next poll for us. So how do you find out if your employee will have enough accrued hours to cover a leave request? So I've just received as a manager a leave request. Somebody wants to take some time off in July. How do I know if they're going to have enough hours to take that time off? Let's think about what we'll want to look at to see that. Or let's say another example. This is similar. You're going to answer this question, but another scenario here. What if I want to know that for myself? If I'm thinking, you know, I'd really love to take a 2-week holiday over New Year's, do I have enough time that I could do that? Well, I might want to look in the future and see how much time I'll have available in the future. If you haven't looked into the leave request process in Uninet, it's a really great process. I would encourage you to look at that and maybe start to implement it for your company. The employees can create a leave request and submit that for their manager's approval. Managers can see all the people in their team that they approve data for, time data for, and who has leave requests in the same time frame, so it can be really helpful. Okay, so last call for any more votes here on what I'm going to do to see the future leave. Okay, all right, Nick, if you want to close this out and share the responses with the group. Okay, so looks like a number of you thought to go out and run the accrual details report, and that's a great report to run. The accrual details report does have an option to show the future projected leave. You can look at the hours in the accrual plan, of course, to calculate that, but I know if you're like me, I don't want to pull my calculator out. I love that you can also ask the payroll department. Of course you can ask payroll, but I want to know for myself, or I want to know for my employees that are submitting those requests to me. So let's go ahead and close this out, Nick, and I'll take a quick look here at this accrual details report. So it's available under the people section for any managers, viewers. There's also a user section where the same accrual detail report lies with access for the end user. When you go in to run that report, you'll choose a future time frame, a date range that includes the dates that you want to take that projected leave for. And there's this option then here to include your projected accruals. When you check that box, the system result is going to be to show you used and earned hours going out into the future. So I can see here that by the end of July, I'm going to have about 90 hours of accrued leave. So I have some time that I'll be able to take, assuming that I don't take any time between now and then. So a good report to know about, something that can be very helpful in helping you manage your accruals. Okay, we have one more poll question. Nick, if you want to launch this one out. So how can you quickly add leave assignments for non-accrued leave in the new year? So here we have this issue where I've got all my holidays set up, I've got everything ready to go and running for my non-accrued leave, and it's my consultant maybe from implementation set that up for me, and now I'm wondering how in the world am I going to get ready for next year and get those assignments out there for next year. So let's go ahead and see what you all think about how you're going to manage this leave balances for next year, and how you can try to do this as quickly and easily as possible. So glad that everybody's still paying attention and going through this with us here. Okay. All right, it looks like we have some good answers. So last call here, get your vote in. Let's see how we're going to manage this. Okay. Looks good. All right, so Nick, you want to close this one? Let's share those results. All right, so again, there's not really a right or wrong answer here. They're all options, but there is a solution that I'd like to show you. So of course you can go out and manually add each user's assignment for the next year. That's fairly easy to do, and those of you that create assignments regularly are probably very proficient with that. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. You could use an organization assignment for things like holidays. What the organization assignments do is they assign an entire department or group of people to a project. The only gotcha there is that there's no budget, and so people can use that unlimited, if you will. So there's no way to control how often people are using that organization assignment to charge time. So if you're trying to limit how much people have, like something like a holidays where you have a certain number of hours people are able to use in a time frame, that might be a bad option. You can import the people assignments, which I'm going to demonstrate here quickly. And I appreciate all of you that think, you know what, I've got a whole lot of time to think about next year because it's only April. So let's talk about these annual assignments here. If I go out into Uninet and I come into my holiday project, here I have all my 2018 leave is sitting out here. It's kind of ready for me. Everybody has a 2018 assignment. And over here on the right, they have a budget of hours. So in my company, I give 80 hours of leave for the year for holidays. And that's what people get. Of course, Grover, we don't know what happened to him, so I'm just going to throw him out of this conversation. So I've got all these people. Now, all these people are eligible next year, too. So what I can do is I can go out from this people assignment list, which I'm accessing by going to the project dashboard and coming into people assignments as an administrator or as a resource assigner to this project. And I can actually export this data. So I can come in and export the data for the current year. I can export one person or all the people. What that does when I export this record is it creates for me an Excel file that has all of the specifications that we need to import the data back in. Now, this data file I know has a bunch of gobbledygook in it. It's got a P's and N's, and the help documentation provides all the import specifications for all these different fields, what these values mean. But I know that I'm pulling this data based on what I had for this year. So it must be pretty good, right? I could come out and just change these dates for next year. And I can go in and, sorry, my computer's talking to me. I can come out and just change these dates. I can come out and change the budget. If next year I'm going to have additional number of hours or something's going to be different here, or maybe I know that Susie's not going to be prorated next year, so I can change her budget. When I save this file, I want to make sure that I save it as a CSV file. Okay. And when you go out and create the file initially, it's going to create it as a CSV for you automatically. So that's something that you should make sure that you have. We have to import CSV files. But now when I come back into Uninet, there's a little import button right here. The import button lets me go out and grab that file that I just saved or any other import file. And I'll be able to grab that file. I can import in this data, send the assignments, see what errors pop up. And when I do this import, what should happen here is it adds the records in. And now if I go out and look for next year's assignments, everybody has their holiday budget already for 2019. So that's pretty awesome. Very, very easy. And I think a great way to manage those budgets. So I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but it is question time. Nick, are there any questions out there?
Yes, we have quite a few.
Okay.
All right.
We'll take as many as we can. Okay.
An employee works for 3 years, then leaves for a couple of years. When they return, we want them to get credit for having worked 3 years for vacation accrual. If we enter a new hire date, the accrual starts with year 1. We want them to start out as having already served 3 years. Do we adjust the hire date, or do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there are, in my mind, there's two answers. You could adjust the hire date and then use the payroll screen to track the payroll hire date, which should be their new date of hire, and think of the hire date that we looked at as the seniority date for accruals. So that's one option. Another option is you could create a different plan an accrual plan that has the 0 years starting off with a higher level of earnings. And we actually see that in companies where people may negotiate a different starting point for their accruals. So if that's the case, you'll want to create a separate plan and associate the user with the different plan, and then manage plans that have different levels of accrual based on how that's starting with a rehire.
All right. For the next one, can you set thresholds on negative leave balances?
Yeah, that's a great question. So within the system today, we don't have a threshold of negative balance. However, our clients manage that in one of two ways. So let me go out here to my vacation project real quick, and I'll show you that. So when we set up Susie as a new user, we associated her with the accrual plan, which set her up with an assignment, starting with her date here, her initial balance. And within this assignment, we're choosing whether or not to allow her to have a negative budget. If I give some reason that I'm going to allow her to go negative, I can check that box. If you allow someone to go negative, but they're getting too negative, they're taking too much leave, you can always deselect this, and then they will not be able to use their leave until they get back into a positive budget. So that's kind of a manual way to manage that, where you just check the box to not allow them to go any further and they have to start earning hours again. An automated way to handle that is through what we call a validation stored procedure, which would run as the user is saving their timesheet and would check their balance to confirm that it is no further negative than your threshold. So that's handled through a validation stored procedure.
All right. We start accruing at date of hire. However, new employees cannot start using PTO until after 60 days of employment. Is there a way to turn off PTO project so it is not an option in the drop-down for charging time before the 60-day period?
Yeah, so I think that's going to be handled just kind of like we did here with Susie, where we set the accrual begin date in the future. The assignment then is made to the project in the future. They can see the project, I believe, in their timesheet, but they can't charge to it until this date. And you would put in a starting balance so that when that date comes, they're getting the hours that they've accrued over that period of time. The only other way around that is to wait and set up their accrual plan until that 60 days has passed, and then set up the accrual plan with the starting balance of what they have accrued in that interim period of time. So you'd have to manually track that accrual amount before they're able to use it.
All right. What about holidays that are set and you don't want them to take them except on the actual holiday calendar?
Yeah, if you have holidays and you want to control the date that that the employee takes the holiday, the best way around that is to actually set an assignment that's for the specific day. We do that actually internally in our own Uninet system as a Uninet company policy. So you would create an assignment for the day. So July 4th specific day with an 8-hour budget or however many hours people get for holidays. And then you'd have to manage that for each person.
And for the next one, is there a report that can be run to show everyone who has been assigned to the project, such as a holiday?
Sure, absolutely, yes. So out in the reports dashboard, there's actually a couple different reports to see that, and I'll collapse this down to show you. The report is called Schedule Details. It's available to project managers under the project section, available to managers under the people section. The difference here is that this report shows the project and all users associated with it. This report shows the person and what projects they're associated with. So if you were asking me to look at holiday, I would start in the project area. I'd filter specifically for my holiday project and look at that for, something like the current year. This will show me, when I run this report, all the users that are assigned to the holiday project, what their budget is, and if anyone has taken any time how many hours they have taken and what the variance is that's left over. Just as a cool little tip, under the time dashboard, there is a quick report. Every single user, every single one of you, even if you don't believe me, has this leave balance report under quick reports on your time dashboard. And this is to see that same kind of data, but only for yourself. So I have a vacation project and a training project, which is considered leave for some reason. And those are the projects I see for myself. Kind of cool little thing to know out there.
When the system prorates for vacation, does it look at calendar days or business days?
That is a great question. It looks at calendar days for prorating leave.
All right, and I think we have enough time for one more question. We are getting a little short on time.
Yes.
And this one is a little bit of a two-part. Depending on how you do this, it will throw off your labor cost post. It generates different values if you pay out based on entering hours in timesheet versus accrual plan adjustment to 0.
I think what you're talking about there, and if you're not, just type in another message and we can clarify this after the call, but I think there what you're referring to is your leave liability report that I showed you earlier.
He means PTO payout.
Yeah, for the PTO payout. So when you're looking at your leave liability, that's going to use your raw data cost rate. And so we're going to look at the cost rate from your person profile to determine the liability. When you pay out the hours by doing an adjustment to the accrual plan, we would be assuming that you're paying at your standard cost rate from the person profile. If you put the hours in a timesheet, then the system, if you have dilution set, will dilute the cost of those hours based on the dilution calculation for a salaried person that's working in excess in the hours of the period. So that is true, and that's why we would recommend doing a leave adjustment as opposed to entering the hours in your timesheet when you want to pay out those hours. So I hope I answered that, but again, we can follow up after the call if necessary. So if that's the last question, I can switch back over to you, Nick. Is that the last question for now?
Yes. And thank you, Christiane, for the great content and Q&A. Once again, the webinar presentation will be available online within a week. And for those of you who have questions we didn't get to, you should see those responses soon from your CSM. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.